I got to the point where I knew I needed that accountability for myself to get to that next level and getting through the exams. And I just really appreciate, I don't know how you guys targeted the ads or whatever. It was right on time because I felt that I needed that accountability. My wife, I think, tried to be my accountability partner in that CPA sense, but it's just different when you have someone who has gone through the process and they know how hard it is to get in that mindset. And it's really just getting to the point where you know you've had enough of it living in your mind and being a place of burden, that you just get serious and lay that foundation, and then have those people around you that can anchor you back and bring you back when you start feeling discouraged or lose confidence in that. I think Superfast definitely provided that, and in those ways, and then more when, especially when you get to the point of you failed one or two or whatever, knowing that process can be relied on to get you over the hump. It's just a matter of knowing why you're doing it, and you guys provide the how.
Welcome to another episode of the CPA Exam Experience Podcast from SuperfastCPA. I'm Logan, and in today's video, you're going to hear me talking with Moises. Now, Moises is somebody that I had in the coaching program, and it was really awesome to be able to work with him throughout a lot of his process. And I actually started helping him towards the very end of his journey. It had been a long journey. You know, a lot of people experience this where he had been trying for a long time, off and on. I think it was about 10 years of not really having very much success. And so he eventually decided to go for SuperfastCPA. He tried that for a little bit, and then he joined the coaching program, and we were able to work together, and he was able to start seeing results. Now, Moises has a lot of awesome tips and a lot of awesome things to say. Something that really helped was, of course, switching to the mornings. Another thing that really helped was focusing on the questions. Again, he has a lot of great tips, and I think you're going to want to listen all the way through this episode because he is someone who is similar to a lot of people. He struggled with the exams for a long time, and then he was able to make some key changes and start passing exams. And actually, another thing that is going to be very helpful about this interview is there was a point where Moises was very disheartened. He failed an exam that he didn't expect to fail, and it really set him back. It really made him really discouraged. But we were able to talk through it, and he was able to keep going, and then he was able to pass the exams. So again, listen to this episode for some encouragement, because failing an exam can feel really horrible, and it can make it very difficult to continue, but you can keep going, and you can pass these exams. Moises is proof of that. I'm excited to share this episode with you. Now, before we dive in, just one quick reminder about our SuperfastCPA training webinar on SuperfastCPA.com. That is a free 1-hour webinar where we will teach you the key ingredients to passing the CPA exam so you don't waste months or even years of your time failing exams. And then there's a lot more to SuperfastCPA, so you'll be able to learn more after you watch that webinar. That's the best place to start, and then you can look into everything else. Now, with that, let's dive into this episode with Moises. Good morning, Moises. How are you doing today? I guess, is it just barely afternoon for you right now?
It is. And by the way, I want to give you props for pronouncing my name right off the bat. First time, didn't need to coordinate or anything like that. So I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah. I lived in Costa Rica for 2 years, so the Spanish names usually aren't too hard for me. So yeah, Moises. So I'm excited to talk to you on the call today. Just a heads up to people who are listening. Moises is somebody that I had in the coaching program, and so I was able to work with him, and it was awesome to see his progress. So we're going to talk about all that today. Where are you calling in from today?
Orlando, Florida.
Oh, Florida. Okay, nice.
Pretty hot.
Is it
hot and humid?
We've had a lot of rain randomly here in Utah, and it's way more humid than it normally is, and it's really bothering me because I'm used to the dry heat. So yeah. I'm sure Florida would be even worse.
It's crazy. Humidity is intense, and then we recently, obviously, the famous afternoon showers kind of get us. So it's been. Yeah. I feel like it's pretty worse. It's gotten worse since summer for some reason.
Well, at least you get to enjoy the rest of your summer because you're done. So let's kind of dive into, your story. So again, you were in the coaching program, but let's kind of talk about what happened before that. So where were you in your career or your life or however when you decided you wanted to get the CPA?
Man, when I came to you guys through advertisements and all that kind of stuff, I had thought through what had gotten me to this point, and I can just say that my life and career up to that point has been full of side quests. So I was always kind of half in, half out with accounting, and specifically with the CPA. So I out of college. I went right into Big Four accounting, busy season, and that was a big transition, just going from like regular, school work hours to then just full bore busy season grind, and ended up finishing that internship, not feeling like Big Four was going to be the path for me. So I took some time away and found myself in a mid-sized public accounting firm. And all throughout that time, the CPA was just pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed and encouraged. And at the time, I was just kind of, maybe 22, 23 at the time, just kind of wanting to experience life. And when I say side quests, I found a girl, got married, did all of the things, traveled, did all of those things in between, and never really gave a full-hearted attempt to the CPA course. So I probably started right out of college, right after I got into my internship. They paid for Becker, and I made the fatal mistake of planning all my exams back to back to back to, like, I had no concept to what the CPA was or like what I was getting into. Just knew that, like, oh, I passed my accounting classes, I should be ready to go for the CPA. I had the credits to sit for it, so I was like, let's just bang this out. I think I took on FAR first, and that first year out of college and my internship. And when I tell you I got chewed out and just got wrecked, it's an understatement. I was obliterated, and so was my confidence. And so not only did I have that, but I had like all three of my other tests scheduled.
All the other ones were right after that.
So they all lapsed within that incredible explosion of just not really understanding what the CPA was, not really trying to research like what it was going to take, even though I had the prep software, the Becker. It was just a combination of just inexperience and like just not taking it serious. So after that epic failure, there was a lot of half in, half out mentality where I was like, okay, maybe I'll revisit this again. Or I was thinking maybe we'll see how this public accounting thing goes. Maybe I'll only be here a couple years, so maybe the CPA won't really impact my career path. So I kept doing this half dance where I was half in, studying a little bit, half not, and so it never really gained traction. So what ended up happening was it just kept eating at the back of my mind, always the CPA, always the CPA, as I progressed through the years in public accounting. And at the job that I was at, essentially worked there for 10 years and got to the level where I was capped. I was hard capped. And that whole time I was just kind of putting off the CPA, putting it off. It's not, I won't see myself here long term, and it happened.
And then it was 10 years.
10 years kind of flew by. And I have a family, kids. I have 3 kids now, obviously with my beautiful wife. Buying a house, doing all the life things, and never really giving the time or the space for the CPA. And so I found myself kind of progressing through the ranks, and I'm at a point where I can't progress anymore in the career that I was seeing myself in without the CPA. So then I said, okay, something has got to give. Something's got to happen. So I worked as an audit supervisor, and I took, just on a whim, I was like, all right, I kept trying FAR. So FAR was like became my big monster that I could never get over. It became this huge monkey on my back. And I always kept trying again for FAR. So I said, all right, let's just clear the slate. Let's try for audit, and let's just see what happens. I studied for audit kind of on my own using Becker. In the meantime, by the way, in those years, Becker had a time lapse, so my Becker course expired.
So you had to rebuy.
I bought Surgeon.
I see.
I didn't like Surgeon, and then ended up back on Becker. So if you add all of that up, that's probably more than like 10K worth of
money.
just
Yep.
study prep material. So this was adding up, and this was becoming, like I said, this was becoming more than just career progression. This was like life. I need to show that I can do this. So clear the slate. I was using Becker again, and I said, okay, I'm going to take audit and see what happens. I studied for audit, and by the grace of God, got a 76, like what I needed for just enough to build up my confidence to be like, okay, maybe this is manageable. Wasn't expecting to pass at all. Like I said, my confidence and like the place that I had gotten to career-wise just was never lending itself to good confidence building for the CPA. So I wasn't really expecting it. Got a 76. I was like, okay, now the timer's on. Now let's see what we can do.
At that point, was it 18-month timer or a 30-month? Like had it switched yet?
Yeah, it switched.
Okay.
So we had the 30. So this is probably like a year and a half now because I started super fast. Maybe like I transitioned into a new path, a new job in private company. So I left public accounting into a private company, which I think in hindsight really lifted the burden of like busy season hours, season, like it's always grind mentality.
And now all of a sudden, also the crushing, like probably the, like, you've got to get your CPA, you've got it. Like probably was heavy as well.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I went into a company where my first thing I told my CFO was like, hey, by the way, I passed one of my exams. And he kind of just like, I was on the phone with him and he was like, okay, yeah, great. Good for your like complete opposite demeanor. Not saying that it was frowned upon, but it was just like a whole different mindset to what it meant to get the CPA. So a lot of those weights, like you said, just lifted. And so I started studying for FAR again. So after audit, I was like, I'm going to try FAR. And maybe a couple of months into my new job and this new rhythm of life, I took FAR and got a 72, I think. And so either 72 or 16, very close right there. And that's when I kept seeing super fast just being advertised. Super fast, every other YouTube video, right? And I had actually subscribed and to like the newsletters and stuff like that. So I kept getting these emails every so often of a round robin of like spots open for super fast training, coaching, accountability. And so there were specific windows that opened up. And so every so often I would see that email and just a little bit more interest. I was like, man, maybe I should try that. So after this failure, what I did is whenever the spots had opened up, I had clicked the link to the portal. And so the portal would either be open for the spots or it would be closed down for that season. Right. And so I bookmarked that page. So I stopped looking for the emails and I just kept refreshing every so often on that website. And one day out of the blue, I was able to get to like the registration. And so I registered, but I don't think I was formally part of the onboarding group. I think I kind of like slipped in by, again, I kind of call it, you know, God working there, and somehow he knew I needed it at the time. So I was able to sneak into the program, and then I started getting these communications with you and Nate and the team. And so that's when we started to really kind of buckle down on strategy, the super fast method. You know, it was also encouraging to hear both you and Nate kind of voice notes kind of encouraging me and building up my confidence, so to speak, and saying like, dude, you're so close. We're going to see great. Like you're the perfect, kind of reinforcing that, like I had made a good decision to kind of start this coaching program.
Yeah. And, so one thing I kind of wanted to like ask about as a contrast. So just to make sure I'm understanding you. So way at the beginning, you had all of those exams like right next to each other. So did you only take FAR and then that one scared you so bad that you didn't even take the other ones, or did you still try the other ones and you failed all of them?
Oh, I tried.
Okay, so you tried all,
and
so
it was
horrible.
4. Okay,
okay. And then
I think I stopped at 2. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think I tried REG and then was like, okay, my confidence is shot here.
Okay. Yeah. And then over the years, did you keep taking exams over those years, or again, was it kind of just like study for FAR, but then never take it, or what was that like?
There was a combination of the two. So there were
Okay.
moments where I felt kind of inspired, motivated, right? That initial burst of energy that you get when you're trying to get back on that horse.
Right.
And then I would either fall short and like not even sit,
Okay.
or I would study and then that energy kind of faded out to where I wasn't studying effectively, and or I would lose track of like the Becker, tracker. I was trying to do the whole Becker, like how they suggest, right? The linear approach, the watch every single video, do every simulation, try to get that meter fully complete.
Get the green check mark.
Exactly. So I was very much trying to do that, and then ultimately falling desperate, and almost, it was almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy because I wasn't fully committed. So I kept reinforcing that negative perspective and that negative confidence when I didn't fully commit. And so I maybe sat for it maybe 2 or 3 separate times, but I almost don't count them because they weren't like the study
You weren't really
method.
prepared.
Yeah. I wasn't really going after it the way I did when I passed audit, right? And so I had that phase where I was studying for FAR and kind of, again, did it the linear method. A little different, but did it the linear method and was actually really trying. And I still, fell short. So I was like, okay, something's got to give. And I've always been
so that's
a
when
person.
you made that change. Okay.
Yeah. So I've always been someone that needed some type of different type of structure, or always willing to try new methods to just get this thing done. And so, I mean, SuperfastCPA, obviously, you guys targeted the right audience there. And so that's how I came along.
So what intrigued you about, like, I guess what changes helped, like contrast, before, where either you weren't fully studying, fully committed, or even when you were, it sounds like you were just doing the normal way of studying. So, lectures, textbook, all that. So contrast that with what changes happened when you got SuperFast CPA. What were some of the big changes that really made a difference for you?
I really appreciated that the first thing that was kind of suggested was to go through the full video library of the mentality of SuperFast CPA, what it actually means. Yes, the pro course, yeah. And so what it actually means to, really commit. I think there was one, I revisited the videos a handful of times too, which was good. And I think Nate even said it in some of his videos that like, hey, you're going to come back to these videos, and it's encouraged. Just some of those laid the groundwork really well of like, okay, this is why you're doing it. Like, don't forget that big why. And I think Logan, you and me revisited that when I was like kind of on that last exam and just kind of felt that hurdle or that fatigue maybe. But just always refocusing the mindset and kind of renewing the mind of like, this is the big why. And obviously I had my wife and the pressures of life kind of like bearing down of like, this is, it's a now or never. The responsibilities are only going to continue to grow. And so a combination of all those things just made it to where, all right, I need to lock in, and the SuperFast gave a very tight way to do that, a really easy way to kind of check the box, right? Of like, okay, I did, my 2-hour session in the morning, check.
Right.
I did my multiple choice and my, audio learning session. So I'd be able to check the box. It gave you a really firm structure to like, if all else fails and like, you've tried the linear way and all these kind of things, if you commit to this process, just showing up and actually putting the reps in, over time, it's gonna show. So I think that was the biggest thing.
Right. Yeah. And as you mentioned in the coaching program, that's something that I really hammer a lot, is the consistency with the process. Like, every piece of the process has a point to it, and doing it consistently, doing it all every day, those two things really kind of start cementing your knowledge and your ability to pass the exams. Even if you maybe still don't pass each exam first try, you're still making a lot of progress, and it's like tangible progress. And I saw that with you. I mean, like, you came in, you'd already passed audit, and you'd had that close score with FAR. And I remember like reviewing your stuff, like your your assignments and things like that. And I was like, okay, yeah, you're getting it. So I knew you were on the path to finishing the exams. Just one question with when you were studying before, were you studying in the evenings, like after work, or were you studying in the mornings?
And that's another thing that probably helped the structure of like, hey, prioritizing the mornings over, or not even that, but like just having a time that that like this is the time where you dedicate to studying.
Yeah.
I was all over the place. So I was, and during busy season even got more volatile, right? So like a lot of the times it would be evenings, or even like if I got out of a meeting or something like that and I had a few extra spare minutes, I would try to squeeze in some time, but it wasn't consistent. It wasn't built up over time like this method, right? The study method that Superfast offers is that there's always that anchor, and as long as you're consistent with that anchor, all of the other stuff is just reinforcing that anchor that you are establishing. So if you commit to the process, and like obviously the mornings worked for me when I made the transition. It was hard for sure. I think I messaged you a couple of times of like kind of falling out of missing a couple mornings or something like that. But going back to like, okay, don't stray away from it. Let's just try to build back that momentum, that consistency. Either, if the mornings didn't work for me, your encouragement was always all right, like find another anchor point in the day, but you have to have that dedicated time where you're consciously like everything is coming back to the study.
This is the time that I'm studying.
Yeah.
And that's something that, I mean, for the majority of people, studying in the morning, whether you're a morning person or not, is what I tell people, because life is so busy. I mean, you have 3 kids, you have a wife, you have a job, you have probably a ton of other commitments, and most of those commitments happen later in the day, like during the day and in the evening. Pretty much everybody who's taking the CPA exam has a busy life. And so doing it in the morning, set aside the freshness of the brain, whatever, set aside those things, and just making sure that it gets done before your myriad of other things that you need to be doing is the big reason why we push that. Like, just get that done so that you don't have to worry about it the rest of the day. And did you find that like, when you were consistent with those 2 hours, did that make it so that, the rest of your day went a little more smoothly? Like, you would have work and then you probably still had time with your family. Is that right?
For sure. 100%. It definitely, when I was really in the flow state, like I could definitely recall for like, for all of the rest of the sections that I had I did ISC, obviously REG, and
FAR.
what was the other one? And FAR. Right. So in each of them, I kind of reached a flow state, so to speak, where it was like so consistent that I almost looked forward to like checking that morning session off the list, because it became something that like, okay, I got this done. And like, if the day goes horribly, I know I had this time. Or, there would be moments where my wife would check in on me and she would be asking like, hey, how was your study session, or what'd you do? And just to be able to tell her like, yeah, I knocked out 2 hours, or like I really made progress in this area. It was really great towards that phase where it usually kicked in around maybe like 2 weeks to 3 weeks out before the exam. That's when it really started hitting, where it almost every time without fail, it kind of a culmination of like the consistency plus the material finally clicking, that it was like, oh, I'm on a roll. Like, let's go. And it almost was like, you're not that you want to study every morning, but it was like, I got it. Like you got into that rhythm where it wasn't as discouraging as like, doing a session and, bombing all of the multiple choice, right? How the methodology has worked, and you have historical evidence to show that it's been working before. So it just kind of keeps you in that state. So for sure, I look forward to crossing it off the list in the morning.
Yeah. And did your family notice a difference in this way of studying compared to before? Like, were you able to have more time with them?
Yeah, for sure. Towards obviously the tail end of like when the actual exam day happened,
Mm-hmm.
they noticed a ramping up of like me just, and it
Right.
wasn't just like your sessions, but it was just me like, okay, I got to make sure that I cram as much as possible in this week span. But I was able to knock it out in the morning. So
Right.
yeah, and kind of sprinkle it throughout the day. So I wasn't really anxious when I got home and was able to really be present with my family and not really have to be thinking in the back of my mind like, oh, I gotta open my
Mm-hmm.
textbook or I gotta open up
Yep.
a Becker session when I get home and try to catch up. And I think even in the beginning, Logan, I may have messaged you when I was getting used to the program. I had gotten into a bad habit of like leaving some of like the multiple choice stuff, like the mini quizzes towards the end of the day. And it's like, no, you don't want to accumulate. You want to like kind of spread it out. And so
Right.
implementing that made it easier to be more present because I'm not thinking so much of like carving out that time when I already kind of established it early on. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that was one of the things that I loved so much about the process when I was doing it was, I was so busy. I was doing my master's degree, I was working, and I had two babies at home. And I was, but because I got the 2 hours done in the morning and then did the mini sessions throughout the day, I was able to still go home and, even at least spend like an hour with my family before I maybe had to go do homework or something like that. Whereas I just like imagine like, what if I had saved my CPA studying either just never did it during that time, and then I would have had to deal with it after my master's program, or, you know, studying for like 3 hours after work and after school and everything, probably never getting to spend time with my family. Like it just makes a huge difference. So I really like what you were saying there. Like just it made it so you were able to be more present. And so you also changed, you not only were you studying in the mornings, but you probably changed your focus, right? You weren't watching the lectures, you weren't reading the text, but you were specifically going to the questions. Was it hard to get used to that, or did that feel kind of natural pretty quickly?
I think it felt natural pretty quickly. And to be honest, I'm reflecting back, I'm like, I feel like I kind of learned a new way to learn, if that makes sense. Like
Mm-hmm.
you are attacking the exam at where exactly you're going to be. And like Becker's
Mm-hmm.
great program because it's literally looks exactly like the test.
Yes.
So like if you're getting familiar with the question format, you're getting familiar with how the questions get presented and like the nuances. So like it's almost like I said, it's a newer approach to learning, which I hadn't ever really adopted prior to Superfast. So to be honest, it kind of helped me feel like, okay, I'm getting these reps in with the questions,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which before I'd be like, oh man, I really got to check off that check mark that shows that I'd watched all of the videos.
Mm-hmm.
And like half of the time, it's almost performative. I'm just doing it just to say that I watched 3 hours of video, which is
Yep.
like, eating up your time and like eating up your mental space. And then it gives you a false sense of security later because you're like, oh, I watched all of this content.
Yep. Exactly.
I should have everything I need, right? And so
I did.
yeah,
I
so
did
it
something
definitely helped.
similar with my first exam with audit. It took me a while to finally kind of implement the strategies, and I remember that even after I like finished, I even after I started applying the Superfast CPA strategies, I wanted to see the green check mark so bad that I literally went to all the lecture videos and just clicked through them. I didn't even watch them, but I just clicked to the end of each one so that it would show that I had, even though it literally
I know
didn't mean
what you mean.
anything.
Yep.
And, it's almost the same mentality of like you said, like you feel like you have to, you're like, I have to watch these, otherwise I'm not going to be prepared. But then after you watch them, you're not really that much more prepared. And then you still have to go practice the questions and kind of work through that anyway, because the questions are totally different. As I'm sure you can attest, like you watch the lecture and then you go to the question and it's just a totally different way of applying the concept.
Yeah. I definitely think Nate also hit on it too. It's a much more active way of learning when you're like going through the questions and like some of the tidbits. I mean, I don't know if I can share some of the secret, but like reading it out loud and like working through it, working through it, and like I must have sounded like a crazy person in my office sometimes when I'm like talking through some of the questions and explaining it to myself, like, how I got to a certain answer, it's a way more engaging. To be honest, it's a little bit more fun than like the taking notes and like regurgitating or things like that. It's a lot more active.
It definitely makes it more interesting. Like, I don't know if you can ever say that the CPA exam is fun, but it definitely, like you were mentioning, you can get into that flow state of where you almost enjoy or look forward to your study sessions because you are doing what's effective. Like you're jumping straight into the questions and you're like, I know this is exactly how I'm practicing what I'm going to see on the exam. So it's almost a little exciting, or it just keeps it interesting because you're like, this is exactly what I need to be doing. And like you said, it's more engaging, so that keeps it more interesting because you're like, okay, this is how this all works together. And did you find that with the Sims as well? How did you study for the Sims?
So to be fair, it wasn't until REG that I paid attention to the Sims too much. So in the disciplines, I did ISC, and so ISC was, because it's newer. It's a newer discipline. The resources for the Sims weren't nearly as.
There's only like
as
8 Sims, right?
Yeah,
or something
it's
like
not
that.
really that robust. And when I sat for the exam, it was completely different. So, and then for FAR, I found I had taken the exam so many times, I almost knew the types of, like, I knew there was going to be a statement of cash flow, and then
Right.
everything else was. So I kind of made sure that I looked at the Sims for the cash flow, make sure I knew that, front and back or whatever. So I don't know if it was just me in particular that FAR like giving me statement of cash flow question Sims, but literally every exam I must have taken it like I think 5 times, and statement of cash flow like always showed
Every
up.
time.
Yeah, every time without fail. So, and that was kind of like my view. If like I knew I got that statement right, I was like, okay, I'm in good shape. I'm kind of like I'm close. So I didn't really use it too much until I got to REG. When I got to REG, I don't know if it's just the way that they ask the questions or the way how the rules are, specifically defined, that you need to be looking really in detail at some of the source documents. But I found myself going to that a lot more, specifically in like the separately stated items for K1s and things like that.
Right.
So that's when I used the Sims, and I would just rewatch the ones that I knew. There's actually a way for me, for Becker, there's a way to see the Sims when you do like a set. In the Sims, they will identify the ones that are like AICPA authored, as opposed to like ones generated from Becker themselves. And so it'll say AICPA authored. So like for the multiple choice, I think they're like 90%, almost all of them are AICPA authored. But for the Sims, I found out that there's only like a handful of actually AICPA authored Sims that like are implemented in the REG software. So out of the 50, I think maybe 10 or 12 were like AICPA authored Sims. So I looked through those. So I spent some time looking at that. So I don't know if that helped me or anything. I mean, it did help, obviously, because I passed, but just getting used to the format, I think, helped, specifically for REG. And so that's how the Sims kind of helped me.
Right. So just making sure I understand you there. So you focused on the Sims once you got to REG that were made by the AICPA, kind of just assuming that if this is from the AICPA, it's probably fairly similar to what I'll actually see on the CPA exam. Is that kind of your thought process?
Yeah, and then I think I ended up taking REG maybe 2 or 3 times in total. So the third one is when I got the pass, but the other two
was that was the last one you passed? Is that right?
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
barely?
yeah.
Okay.
Yes. So I got REG on the third try, and the first 2 attempts, I noticed that I was like leaving too much time on the table, so I wasn't dedicating that time to Sims like I should have, because as soon as I changed that formatting of adjusting the time, I was able to pass. So I passed REG with that. So I had some reps in with the actual CPA exam for REG, so specific sections that I knew I had problems with. I think it's R3, the biggest one with the LLC and what's
Like the
separately
business
stated and
stuff.
things like that. So
Yeah.
yep. So that's really the area that I kind of dedicated a lot of like my sim time to.
Okay. And let's kind of talk a little bit about that, about exam day timing. So when you're saying that, just, for anybody who maybe hasn't really thought about the timing for the CPA exam, you're mentioning that you would get through this multiple choice questions in a good amount of time, but then you wouldn't you weren't diving into the sims. You were kind of, I don't know if this is the right word, but rushing them a little bit, because then you would have time left over at the end of the exam that you could have spent perfecting the sims a little bit more. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Okay. Basically, yeah, that's exactly what it is. So up until prior to reg, with FAR, I used up all of my time, and so the obviously the multiple choice are rigorous. So when I got to the testlets, they also kind of take up a lot of time. So my mentality was, because I was using all of the time on those sections, I didn't really think about like breaking up the when I say breaking up, is like I wrote down right before the exam, like, okay, Testlet 1, I'm dedicating this amount of time. Okay. Testlet 2, this amount of time. 3, this amount of time. 4, 5, laying out like the markers, the flags that I should be looking for to move on to the next one. With FAR, I had done that, but I was always pretty good with keeping up with the trend, so I never really
it kind of just happened
thought
naturally.
Of that. Yeah, it kind of happened naturally. And then with ISC honestly was my highest scoring one. And the sims were to be honest, it was a lot simpler. So I didn't question whether they were incorrect or not, to be honest. So I had plenty of time to review each of the multiple choice, each of the sims, like really well. So I didn't have an issue there. But with reg, I got into the rhythm of the multiple choice. So I like blew by the multiple choice and was comfortable with them. And so then when I got to the sims, I was like, oh, I need to make sure I leave enough time I always thought there was going to be a more harder sim coming up.
Yeah, bigger sim.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and obviously the way the CPA exam works is once you submit, you can't go back. To that. So you got to optimize the time that you have. So what really was the breakthrough for me is that I said, I am not moving from this Testlet or this sim until I use this exact amount of time. So for the multiple choice, the last time I sat, I had the multiple choice questions. And so if I got through it in like 30 minutes, I did not move on until I think it was like 35. I think maybe, I forget the breakdown. I think it was maybe 45 minutes for the MCQ and then a little bit more time on the sims. So if I got it done in 30 minutes and I still had 15 on the radar to moving until I get to move on, I would use those time like, all right, stay there, review all of the questions, and then if you feel certain and you went through all of the flags, that's another thing that I would do is flag. If there was anything that it took more than 10 seconds to understand what that question was asking, I'd flag it and just do all of the layups. It's kind of what I call it. And so I made sure that I stuck to the allotted amount of time for each Testlet. So that prevented me from rushing. And so then when I got to the sims, I knew, okay, 50 minutes on this sim, that's it. Like, even if I finish it in 25 minutes, the other 25 minutes is just even redoing it to make sure that I, didn't miss something. And so I remember on the last Testlet for reg, I may have caught like 2 or 3 things that I don't know if it contributed to passing, but I caught 2 or 3 things that I was like, oh, if I didn't carve out that time, I probably wouldn't have caught it. And so, so it was definitely for reg. I think I got into the rushing mode and then didn't flesh it out. And I think reg is one of those sections that like very nuanced. So if you
miss one thing, it messes up the rest.
Exactly. So
that's definitely true for reg, like with the tax returns and things like that. Like you mess up one part of it and then the ending tax is messed up and the other calculations are messed up. And this kind of all goes back to something that we've talked about a million times on the podcast, and we talk about in Superfast CPA in general, but just how important the pacing is for the exam, especially being really good at multiple choice questions. like you said, you had the multiple choice questions down, and it sounds like you were getting through them in like an hour,
Yeah.
hour and a half,
Yeah,
like
they were
really
really
quickly.
yeah.
And you know, our recommendation is max 2 hours for the multiple choice questions, because that way you still have 2 hours to do all the sims. But again, if you get so good at the multiple choice questions that not only are you doing them quickly, but you're doing them well, like you're getting good points, like you said, they kind of become easy points if you know what you're doing a lot of the time. So, that makes it so that you're done with the MCQs by like hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. And then you still have 2.5, 3 hours to work on the sims. And that made it so that you could take the time to really make sure that each sim was done, which is a huge difference maker, like you're saying.
Yeah. And recognizing the pattern too for the sims. So like I think reg is 2-3-2. So
Okay.
in the past for the sims, like I didn't even think about like this one only has 2 versus this one that has 3. I like really made sure that I knew, okay, I have 2 sims here. I'm gonna dedicate the allotted time for it. And so that forced me to slow down. Exactly what you're saying, pacing.
Yeah.
It's all about giving yourself that grace to be able to look back and like you could have overlooked something. And so the last time I took reg, I went from like the last 2 times that I had failed, I had left like an hour on the clock. And that was my flag. I mean, I probably should have caught it on the first fail, but you live and you learn. That I was leaving too much time on the table. So it was don't rush it, and just let it trust the process that you built out for yourself.
Right. Yeah. And, that's not to say that, because there definitely are times where I've seen people who, there was one person I had on the podcast, her name was Samantha, who she finished every exam in under 2 hours, the entire exam. And I was just like, geez, and she passed them. So like, it depends on the person, but overall, the most important thing, like we've been saying over and over again, is the pacing. Like, you don't want to make it so that you only have 10 minutes to do 3 sims. You just can't do that. So anyway, that's why that's also important. But and kind of still talking about test day, were there any other things that you found to be helpful, like any tips or advice that you have for like being in the exam, or kind of like prepping right as you're about to go into the exam?
For me, I definitely really appreciated Logan. Nate has a video that has kind of like a prep on exam day, which is I always found pretty helpful, which was showing up an hour, maybe even an hour and a half before the exam. So that would force me, to get there earlier enough to not be like rushing. So like I remember times for like FAR or audit that I would get there like right as the time starts, and so I was like kind of just dropped in and like go take this exam.
Yeah.
So it's almost like it's easier, and I had been studying before, but like just arriving to the test center and like making sure you have everything kind of in almost like a pre-checklist before you actually go in, just kind of puts you in the right mindset. And there were definitely times at the testing center where just some things you can't even control. Like there was one session that I went to where the person, like you're supposed to arrive 30 minutes early, on the notice it says you should arrive 30 minutes before the actual exam starts. And it just so happened that day there was like a new person starting at Prometric or whatever, and she was a real stickler for this 30-minute arrive 30 minutes before the exam. And I was like, am I even going to be able to sit? Because she was just very like, I can't believe, I think I may have arrived like 15 minutes before the window. So instead of being 30 minutes early, I was 15 minutes early. Right. Okay. And so she made a big deal about it being no, it has to be 30 minutes. So if you arrive early, right, you kind of save yourself from things that you can't even control or can't even fathom. Another thing that I did was made sure hydration, right? I think there was another time where same person, the same session, I had to use the bathroom, and I did like an optional break, and the person again was newer.
Still running.
Yeah. So I did an optional break, and I stepped out. Well, that person was like, "Wait a second, you did a break without, she thought that I wasn't allowed to step out of the room.
Mm-hmm.
So there was like 10 minutes I'm sitting there and I didn't pass this time. So I didn't pass that
It could have been
time.
that.
So it could have been that. But I was like 10 minutes in trying to figure, with the proctor, trying to figure out like, did he or did he not use his bathroom break appropriately, right? So like if you get there early and you use the bathroom when you need to use the bathroom, make sure everything, you're good. And sometimes you can't really prevent that, but like getting there early really solves a lot of that issues, right? A lot of those issues. I think another random thing, as I always wore a hoodie. So if you wear like a jacket, they make you take off the jacket and you have to leave it in the locker. But if you have a hoodie, there's no easy way to take it off. So you can leave it on for the exam. And then if you get hot, you can take it off. But the prometrics that I had been to had always been really cold. So I almost had a ritual outfit that I would wear for the exams. So I would
you wouldn't have to be worrying about the cold.
Yeah, exactly. I had a specific hoodie. I had a specific outfit that I would wear for all my sections.
I did that.
So
I did that too.
Yeah.
I had a Metallica shirt that I wore to every exam.
Nice.
and talking about the timing. Well, actually, just kind of in general, like with test day stress, I think that one of the best things about practicing so much before the exam with multiple choice questions and with sims is that it really helps you kind of stay calm in the situation because you've been doing it for weeks. Yeah. You've been doing the exact same thing. And I remember similar thing to, like, there was somebody who had just started that day. This was my last exam too. And I really had to go to the bathroom, and it was one of those optional breaks, and I went out, and I was like, and she was like sitting there like, I don't know, like, is this, and I was like, listen, I have been here 4 times. I know that I can do this. Just give me the dang, like, I didn't say it, but I was just like, just give me it and I will go. And she was like, oh, okay. And like, but yeah, like, you can't really control those situations. But again, what I'm trying to say with this is, even though that was a little bit annoying, when I came back, I wasn't stressed or flustered by the exam because I still knew what I was doing. And did you kind of feel that somewhere, like you'd gotten to the point where you're like, I know what I'm doing. Like, I know how 100%. To do this. Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think with the exception of, I think ISC, which I passed on the first time, and an audit. The other 2, REG and FAR, I had multiple attempts on it, right? But it definitely was that thing of like, you've done it over and over. You've had those reps. And another thing that I had, obviously, right before, on exam day, that right before, sitting in with some of your notes, your like notes or flashcards. I think at the end of my process, I had just handwritten notes of like all of the questions that I knew I had gotten wrong from like that weekend cram session. I think Nate also made a great suggestion to schedule your exams every Monday, on a Monday. So obviously my PTO took a hit on those days, but it was great in the sense that I like had 2 full days, a full weekend to really just eat, sleep, breathe this exam, and then on Monday just dump it all out there and let that be what it is.
Leave it on the table. Yeah. And actually, I was going to ask about that. So like, this is something that we recommend is, studying your flashcards and stuff right before you go into the exam. So in general, not just on exam day, but like as a whole, what did you do when you were going through the material to kind of help difficult topics stick? Like, how did you do flashcards? Did you take notes? What did that look like?
So for me, it was, I definitely took handwritten notes. So it got to the point where I would use some of the suggestions that you had. I think for FAR, I had an Excel that had like all, because there's so many different types of questions in FAR. So I had kind of an Excel for each of the modules, and I had kind of broken out by module where my hard points were. And I would either do a flashcard in FAR, but on REG, I ended up handwriting a lot of the rules and little nuances. So the things that would help me, it was actually one of the newer things that they added, some of the AI implementation. Like there's an AI in Becker, but there's also, I mean, if you go on ChatGPT 2 as well, I would take screenshots of my question And like if I got it more than once incorrect, like if I saw it again in a different session and I got it wrong, I would kind of plug it into ChatGPT and just be like, dude, I don't get this. Explain it to me like I'm 5, and then give me something to reinforce it. Or I would tell it to um, kind of make it stick. So I would kind of tell it specifically, like, I need to be able to remember this on exam day. Like, how do I make a quick either rule or mnemonic or something like that? And 9, maybe like 7 out of 10 times, ChatGPT would come up with like a really good idea. But to be honest, sometimes it would just come up with like a ridiculous way to remember it. And it's almost like in that silliness, you're reading and reviewing it. It's almost like you're getting that. It's all about that exposure, that rep, and it's explaining it in different ways to where you're like, okay, you're seeing different angles of the question, and like obviously, on that Chat GPT side, I would ask it to formulate different types of questions of that same type, and so I'd be able to like hyper focus on those. I will say that sometimes I think there was one of the sections on REG. I may have leaned on it a little bit too much, so there's precaution there not to let ChatGPT become your tutor, because I don't know if it's like a memory thing or like just an issue with how it processes some of the historical information. But sometimes there's gaps on like the types of I kind of used it to try to track how I've been improving and things like that. And sometimes ChatGPT just doesn't track that.
Or they'll be like, based on what you've said in the past, and then it says something totally irrelevant.
Yeah. So there's caveats there, but I definitely try to use as much of different resources or like different ways to like write it out. I even was like talking through the questions with myself at one point. So like just really trying different ways when I did see a topic that just kept reoccurring over and over, just trying different ways to get different angles on. So,
yeah. And kind of expanding on that a little bit. I mean, I used to have a don't use AI kind of a thing like a while ago, but I think that if you use it wisely, it can be very helpful. Like you said, though, the thing that I think I always get nervous about with it is when people basically use it as almost as their second brain. They're like, exactly. Oh, I'll just ChatGPT said it, so therefore I must know it.
Right.
Instead of them actually like internalizing the information. So you just got to be careful with AI. Like, use it more, in my opinion, you use it more of as like a clarification tool rather than a teacher. That's kind of my because that sounds kind of like what you're doing. Like, hey, explain this to me in a way that I can understand it. But then you didn't just leave it at that. You would still go back and like make sure that you understood it, explain it to yourself.
Yeah, and there was times. So I think when I was using it, ChatGPT, and I think I used Gemini too, was a little limited. So like they wouldn't let me have full blown conversations. But what I was doing sometimes is like if I saw a question and I'm like, okay, this is a problem area, I would speak to it as if I was explaining it to someone else, and I would tell it, hey, is there any like faultiness in what I'm saying on how I'm elaborating this, and try to see if they would get feedback as to like, oh, you explained this well, but like you needed to clarify these rules or something like that. Right. Or even if like, I think I caught it once on, I think it was like a tax regulation rule where it gave the very general ruling, but then I knew the exception. So I like followed up and said, except when you do this, and this. And then ChatGPT was like, "Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's exactly right."
Right.
So, yeah, I remember that. So yes, 100%. It's not a end all be all to like replace anything. It's more of like if you know what you're looking for and how to use it, then it could be a useful tool.
Yeah, exactly. Because in the end, who has to go in and take the exam? You, not AI. So you have to know it. Talked about quite a few different things throughout this, and I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but kind of as we're wrapping up here, something that I did want to talk about with you was your like motivation. Because you passed audit, then struggled with FAR, then joined SuperfastCPA. And it seems like to me, in your mind, even though you still had to take FAR 1 or 2 more times, it wasn't as discouraging because maybe you just kind of looked at FAR as like, it's hard anyway, so eventually I'll pass it. And then ISC, you passed it. But then with REG, I remember you had 3 passed, and then you failed REG for that first time, and it really seemed to just shatter your confidence a little bit. And especially the second time that you failed REG. So to kind of walk us through that, like, you don't have to go into super big detail, but like, you were really unmotivated, and then how did you kind of come out of that and finally pass REG? Like, what was that process like?
It's definitely one of those things where, like, in hindsight, you're like, what were, like, come on, you're you're 3/4 of the way there. What, there's no way you could ever possibly run out of like motivation to like push you through. But I think it was a combination of like fatigue, and then it was almost like I started questioning, like, man, do I needed something new to replace this process? Like, why can't I get over the hump? Or like, what's going on that I can't fully grasp? Reg was also kind of like the area that I wasn't familiar with. So I worked in audit. So like that covers audit, IS, and then a lot of FAR, right? Is like all what I work in the audit space. So with tax, it just was a lot of like newer information that I hadn't seen in years. And so I think what ended up clicking is, unfortunately, because I had those reps, I had seen enough of the material that I was really comfortable with it. Like, I think that first fail was really kind of demoralizing, where I was like, okay, I studied this way on the CPA method, and I didn't pass. Like, what's going on? And so that's when I started to kind of question that. And I think that's when we started going back and forth on like, all right, let's refocus on the why. Like, let's eliminate all of the other things that are kind of going through my head, and like, let's just keep it simple to like what has worked. You've already seen the historical proof that it has. Like, recommit yourself to the process. And that, coupled with the fact that I was, getting more familiar with the material being shown. And then I think even my wife made a comment when I was studying for REG. It's like she kind of felt like I was running out of steam, running out of gas, because it wasn't as engaged as I was when I was like so like laser set. So I think a lot of it came back to maybe some fatigue. I hadn't really gone back to like the things that we spoke about at the beginning, those foundational pillars that like make CPA, super fast CPA good, in that it like keeps grounding you. So I needed to have that reminder of like, all right, what is this process? Why am I going through the CPA, super fast CPA process in the first place? Like, reinvigorating that. And then once I started doing that, I'm like, okay. So I definitely had a period, and I know about that, because we messaged every week, of like, there was a period where I just wasn't on that consistency. I just had fallen off, and it was just got to that point where it was harder to get back into the rhythm. And I think it was just a lot of like trying to, okay, what's going on? Like, how do we get back? And it just took a little bit more of a real solid look at like the why. I think it started with that refocus of the why, conversations with my wife of like refocusing, kind of kicking my butt a little bit, of like, dude, you're like, remind yourself close. Where you're at. You're right there. There's no way I was gonna give up at any point. But it was just like that, like, again. And I think it also hurt a little bit when I did take some of the sections. There was a break between like finding out the score and finding out the score. So in that week period, as much as you and me, Logan, we talked about, all right, let's stay on it. I definitely like I definitely took time off and was like, wow, this is what it could be like without the CPA. And then without the CPA prep. And so it kind of felt like the rug was just ripped out from under me,
so
right?
close. And no,
yes,
not
exactly. And then especially that second time too, I really thought I had done it, because I felt so confident in at least the multiple choice piece. And I think I got a 69 on that piece, but that's because I had left an hour on the table. So it was, again, that second time wasn't as bad as the first, but, because I felt confident in the material. And then that second time was like, man, I just think I rushed through it and I didn't dedicate the time that I needed to on that last piece. So it was kind of like assembling the puzzle of like, okay, what are the missing pieces for me to get that pass?
Right.
So, yeah.
And if I'm not wrong, at some point, either after the first fail or the second fail of reg, like you were just talking to me about how unmotivated you were. Like I could tell you were really down. And I think that what we did is I had you go back and look at your motivation sheet that we do. And like, either redo it or at least look at it. And I think you even sent it to me, and I just like looked over it and was like, and yeah, the big reminder, like you said, I was just like, you are so close. Like this is not the time to stop because you're so close. And but it was awesome, like seeing that turnaround. Like you were super down especially after the first one, and then even after the second one, it was different. Like you said, you were kind of like, okay, I think I know what is wrong. And then you went in and it passed, and that was only just barely, right? Like you just found out how many days ago?
Yeah, so it was like 2, and that's probably the other thing too, of like recognizing when I was close, as opposed to like needing to restudy the material. So I got my results in like June 15th or something like that, like in the middle of June. And I was like, man, that was that second time that I was like, man, I really thought I did well on the multiple choice. I think it's just the sims that I need to kind of work through and get that timing right. So my question to you, and I had asked, other people around me, of like, should I just push to the 30th? And I scheduled it for the 29th, I think. And everybody was kind of like, dude, you're right there. Especially, it helped to have others that had gone through the process. I bonded with a coworker of mine from that public accounting firm who was like a very similar position to me. I don't think he went through the SuperfastCPA process, but like had family, had gone through like the same, almost, it was weird that we mirrored so much of each other. But he was like, dude, go all just like get pushed to the 30th. And I think the material gets updated July 1st.
It changed on July 1st.
And reg. Yeah, so I even had more incentive to like get it done. And I think my wife even made a comment after that second fail. She was just kind of like you're saying now, that she was like, sensed that I wasn't, obviously I was bummed, but I wasn't like I completely lost the faith or that I was losing momentum. She's like, I really feel like you're studying like I did for like FAR, right? So like, those were a lot of the flags that indicated to her that I was like really putting in the effort. And so so that's really kind of how we got there.
And I just have 2 more questions, but first, how does it feel to be done? I'm sure you're still on like cloud 9.
I still, so my kids, all 3 of my kids ended up getting sick the week I found out. So they got like the stomach bug. So I haven't been able to like celebrate. Haven't been able to
that's how
do like a
goes,
formal,
right?
a formal dinner or anything like that to celebrate. And then the partner at my public accounting firm, who was like a big encourager to like get my exam, she had surgery the day that I told her. So like nobody was giving me like the big ups. I mean, I downplay. I definitely did get calls and stuff like that of like celebrating with me. So I say all of that to say it hasn't like fully sunken in. I think it won't really hit until I get that certification in the mail with the thing that I can frame up on the wall. So it's slowly processing. I think one of the best feelings was this past weekend, where I'm like, don't have a guilty thought in the back of my mind of like, I need to be studying right now, or like maybe after I put the kids down for a nap, I can study a little bit, right? So that's just gone now, and it's just like I've had it on the back of my mind for so many years that to now be able to say that I've conquered it. I mean, it's just it's hasn't fully hit yet.
But I mean, it's just after such a long journey, it has to feel just like unreal. Like, has it actually is it actually done? Yeah, I mean, I'm really happy for you, Moises, and like I said, I did have two last questions. First is there any part of your process or your story or anything like that, before the call, you probably were thinking about things you wanted to say. Is there anything that we haven't gotten to talk about that you did want to talk about?
I don't. I think we touched on a lot of the things that you had listed out some things that we were going to be discussing, and I think we hit on a lot of things. I think the main thing is probably for me, I got to the point where I knew I needed that accountability for myself to get to that next level and getting more getting through the exams. And I mean, I just really appreciate, I don't know how you guys targeted the ads or whatever. It was right on time because I felt that I needed that accountability. My wife, I think, tried to be my accountability partner in that CPA sense, but it's just different when you have someone who has gone through the process and and they know how hard it is to get in that mindset. And it's really just getting to the point where you've had enough of like it living in your mind and being a place of burden, that you just kind of get serious and lay that foundation, and then have those people around you that can anchor you back and bring you back when you start feeling discouraged or lose confidence in that. I think Superfast definitely provided that, and in those ways, and then more when you just get to the, especially when you get to the point of like you failed one or two or whatever, knowing that that process is can be relied on to get you over the hump. It's just a matter of like knowing why you're doing it, and you guys provide the how. So
Yeah, I mean, and yeah, it was you were a great person to work with in the coaching program, and I mean, really, in the end, of course, it all comes back to you, like you were able to do it, and it was just awesome to be able to see that. And I've really enjoyed talking with you. I mean, this is the most we've talked, like I think in a
sure.
row,
Yeah,
because with the coaching program we do messages and voice messages mostly. But yeah, this has been really awesome. And as we're wrapping up, if you've listened to any of the other podcasts, you already know what I'm going to ask. But the last question that we always like to ask on the podcast is, what would be your top 2 or 3 tips, even if it's something that we've already talked about, 2 or 3 tips to people who are still going through the CPA exams?
All right. So 2 or 3 tips I would definitely say is constantly remind yourself of the why. Surround yourself with those that know the mission and that are going to not only encourage you, but have you be able to like get into the nitty gritty, like to be able to discuss like, dude, this particular study session, like I wasn't clicking for me. Like be able to talk to those individuals that are just know the process. So surround yourself around that positive thinking and that positive encouragement that's going to keep you grounded to your why. And then once you commit your mindset, commit to the process. And that's what's going to get you that showing up consistently every day. I promise it happened to me multiple times in the sections where I didn't think things were clicking, and then all of a sudden 1 week just hit and averages started shooting up on like multiple choice, and the rhythm just it happened without fail. That rhythm get there, but it takes that consistency and that showing up even when it's like even when you don't feel like you've made any progress, or that score didn't look the best that day. It's all about incremental 1% increase. So
Yeah. Show up every day and just do it every day. I mean, that's just that's kind of like the base, like you said. That's kind of the foundation. So yeah, I mean, you had a lot of fantastic tips today, Moises, and awesome story. And congrats on being done with. How long was the journey total? Like, was it 10 years? More than 10 years?
It was if you it was a year and a half of taking it to the grindstone serious with the Superfast CPA, and my whole the actual exam component was a year and a half. Journey in total was probably 11 and a half years. Like
Yeah.
I almost feel sickening to say that. But it took some maturing on my end, finishing some side quests, like I said, but we got there. So
Yeah, you did it. And yeah, I mean, congrats on being done. I hope that everything goes smoothly with, finishing the rest of the licensing, but you did the hard part. So yeah, congrats. And thanks for being on the call today, Moises.
thanks for having me, Logan, and thank you, Superfast.
All right, that was the interview with Moises. Again, that is a great episode. And actually, just in case you didn't notice, this is our 200th episode. So that's pretty amazing. Having 200 episodes, mostly interviews of people who have been able to have success using the SuperfastCPA CPA method to pass their exams. I mean, that's incredible. Again, not all of them are interviews, but the vast majority of them are interviews with people who have had success. And it was awesome to be able to talk to Moises for that 200th episode and hear how he was able to make some changes and pass the CPA exam. It was awesome having him in the coaching program, and I hope that this episode was helpful to you. Now, before you go, just a reminder to go to SuperfastCPA.com and sign up for our free 1-hour webinar training. That is a free 1-hour webinar where we will teach you the key ingredients to passing the CPA exam so you don't waste months or even years of your time failing exams. And again, that's the best place to start. Then you can learn more after that about maybe the pro course or our supplemental study materials or getting the total bundle. Now, make sure to like and leave a comment on this YouTube video if you found it helpful, or leave a rating in your favorite podcast app. Thanks again for 200 episodes, and we will see you in the next one.